My boyfriend thinks we're going to lose our virginity together next weekend. The problem is, that already happened for me. Sort of. I had a baby when I was 16 and gave him up for adoption. Weston has been planning this trip for weeks. He booked a cozy bed and breakfast in the mountains, made a playlist he literally called Our Special Night, and keeps grinning like an idiot whenever he mentions how perfect it's all going to be. I just smile back and feel like I'm suffocating. We met 8 months ago in the cafe of a little bookstore. He was reading some heavy philosophy book, and I made a joke about Nietzsche that made him laugh so hard he spilled coffee everywhere. When we started dating, he asked about my relationship history. I told him I'd been focused on school and never found the right person. His whole face lit up. He said he was the same way, waiting for someone who felt like meant to be. He even said the word soulmates by our third date. Weston is the kind of guy who writes you letters, plans scavenger hunt dates based on inside jokes, and learns how to cook your favorite childhood meal just because you mentioned missing it once. If I had met him before everything that happened, before Sammy, before the closed adoption and the stretch marks and the guilt, I probably would have felt like I deserved him. I picked Sammy's adoptive parents out of a binder full of smiling couples with dogs. They seemed kind. They had a golden retriever. I held him for 10 minutes before they took him away. The adoption was closed, and I told them to stop sending photos after the first year. Sometimes I still wonder if he likes dinosaurs or if he inherited my seasonal allergies. I'll probably never know. When Weston and I got serious, he started talking about waiting for the perfect moment. 6 months in, he was making jokes about taking cold showers and how proud he was we were both saving ourselves for each other. And I played along. Every time he talked about how romantic it was going to be, how we'd be able to figure it out together with no pressure, I just nodded and pretended to be shy. It got harder when I met his family. His mom hugged me at Thanksgiving and told me she was so grateful I was such a good influence on her son. She said his last girlfriend pressured him about sex, and she was happy he found someone who shared his values. I just smiled while thinking about my wider hips and the stretch marks on my stomach. Then Weston's sister had a baby. We went to the hospital to visit. Weston held his tiny nephew so gently and kept glancing at me with this soft look on his face. Later, he said he couldn't wait for our kids to have cousins close in age, and I couldn't breathe. The guilt was unbearable. I almost told him one night when we were watching a movie about a girl lying about her past, but then he said he could forgive anything except a big lie. He kissed me right after that, telling me how lucky he was that I understood honesty. I spent that night crying in my car outside his apartment. 2 weeks ago, I ran into Sammy's adoptive mom at Target. She had him with her. He's 3 now, and he looks just like me except for his dad's black hair. He was holding a toy dinosaur and roaring at the shelf. She didn't recognize me. I hid in the bathroom until I threw up. That night, Weston made my favorite dinner and kept asking why I was quiet. I lied and said it was work stress. So he moved our weekend up. Then came the bracelet. Weston's mom invited me to lunch, gave me a family heirloom bracelet that she said Weston's grandmother wore on her wedding day, and told me how happy she was that her son had waited for the right girl. She said I reminded her of herself. Innocent, pure, honest. She even used the word values. I wore the bracelet to dinner that night because Weston would have noticed if I didn't. He kept touching it, smiling at me like he could already see our whole future together. House, wedding, kids. He has no idea that I already lived through the hardest part of parenthood. I keep thinking about what's going to happen in that mountain cabin. He'll light candles and play his playlist. He'll be slow and careful. He'll tell me how happy he is we waited. And I'll have to look him in the eye and pretend this is new. Pretend my body hasn't already been through labor and stitches and breast milk. My mom keeps telling me I need to tell him before the trip. My therapist says the same. But every time I try, I imagine Weston's face, that wide-eyed look of someone whose whole worldview just collapsed. And I can't do it. Tomorrow is our trip. I have one more night to decide whether to tell him everything and risk losing him, or put on the pretty lingerie I bought and let him keep believing he's my first. Either way, after this weekend, everything between us will change. The drive up was quiet but nice. Weston had made a road trip playlist and kept sneaking little glances at me like he couldn't believe this was finally happening. I tried to match his excitement, but my stomach was in knots. When we got to the cabin, it was even cuter than the photos. Fairy lights on the porch, little fire pit, a view of the mountains. Weston carried in our bags and made hot chocolate. We spent the afternoon hiking and laughing, and for a few hours, I almost forgot about everything. Then sunset came. Weston put on his playlist, lit candles, and handed me a letter. It was 3 pages long. He wrote about how much he loved me, how he'd waited his whole life to meet someone who made him feel like this, how he wanted this night to be perfect. By the time I finished reading, I was shaking. Weston kissed me and started to unbutton my shirt. And that's when I blurted it out. I told him everything. That I'd had a baby at 16, that I'd given him up for adoption, that I wasn't the innocent first-timer he thought I was, and that I'd let him believe something about me that wasn't true. He just sat there for a second, completely still. Then he stood up and walked outside. I didn't follow him right away. I just sat there on the bed staring at the letter in my hands, wondering if I'd just ruined everything. After a while, I went outside. Weston was sitting on the porch steps, head in his hands. When he looked up, his face was wet. He wasn't mad about the pregnancy. He was hurt that I hadn't told him sooner. He said he felt like the version of me he'd been picturing in his head. The one we'd both been pretending was pure. Wasn't real. And he was right. We stayed outside for a long time. I told him about Sammy's adoptive parents, about seeing him in Target. Weston asked questions, gentle ones, about what it was like, how I'd felt if I regretted my choice. Then he held me and said, "I wish you'd trusted me with this sooner, but I still love you." That night, we didn't sleep together. We just lay in bed talking until sunrise. We decided we'd wait until we were both ready again, not because of some idea of first times or purity, but because we wanted it to feel honest this time. The next morning, Weston made pancakes and kissed the stretch marks on my stomach. He said, "These aren't something to hide. They're proof you survived." And for the first time since Sammy was born, I believed him. We still haven't had sex yet. We're taking our time, but we're closer now than we've ever been. I'm glad I told him.